we are obsessed with the excellence, but we don't want wine on steroids. We don't like that stuff. Our wines have always this clear fruit, are always expressive and vibrant. So even the most complex wines of Castello di Ama, you would find this kind of approachability and elegance. Those are wines that really people that normally don't even drink red wines can approach.
The Castello di Ama wine ghosts are some of the most elegant bottlings of Tuscany, thanks to their location in one of the highest parts of Chianti Classico. The estate was leading the way in the creation of the Gran Selezione and in the single vineyard wines in the area. Oh, and they were also the first ones to bottle single-varietal Merlot in the region. You could also hear Lars Granat Jensen, the CEO of Rare Wine Invest, praising the estate in our last episode, which might leave you with an extra incentive to look into the Castello di Ama wines more intensely. So enjoy this episode. Cool, Lapo. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, it's a great opportunity to have this conversation with you. Since our last time we met in Austria, we tasted good wines together. So now I really like to explain what we do and where we are.
Cool. Thanks for taking the time. Can you please briefly introduce what do you do for Castello di Ama and why do you love to work there? Why is it a special place for you?
I am in charge of the export sales. So I'm an export manager for Castello di Ama. I started my career in wine more than 10 years ago as a winemaker. And 4 years ago, I met Lorenzo and then I started to work for Castello di Ama. I think it's a creative environment, Castello di Ama. So we have a fantastic collection of contemporary art because Lorenza Sebasti, the CEO and owner of Castello di Ama, she's a collector and passionate about contemporary art. So every year we invite a new artist and he will create a site-specific installation just for Castello di Ama. So if you want to know a bit more about this project, I invite you to visit the estate and to visit our website because it's a very exciting project that began in 2000. So now it's more than 20 years. And then, of course, we are wine producers. So we started as a winery in 1976, approximately 50 years ago. 4 friends and businessmen from Rome started the estate. And now, as I said before, the second generation is running the winery. So Lorenzo Sebasti is the CEO and Marco Pallanti is the winemaker and technical director since 1982. I'm very proud to say that because also we have the same winemaker since 40 years. And that's a very important factor. As a winery, we have more or less 185 acres of vineyards, so 75 hectares, and 100 acres or 50 hectares of olive trees. So we produce wine and olive oil.
Because your vineyards are located in the outskirts of Gaiola in Chianti, right? In the province of Siena. And this territory was already described by the Grand Duke of Tuscany, I think in the 18th century as among the most beautiful valleys and hillsides in all Chianti.
Here the landscape is beautiful, rolling hills. We are quite high in altitude, and then I will tell you a bit more about the area where we are. We are between 350 meters and 520 meters above sea level, between Firenze and Siena. We are in the Chianti Classico wine appellation between these 2 beautiful cities, and we have many plots around. So all these plots that you see today, if you come to visit us, you will see many different small plots have been replanted since 1976. So it's all quite modern, as the cellar also was rebuilt. Because when they bought the property, there were, old vines, old vineyards with low density. And so Marco Pallanti and Lorenzo, they replanted everything from scratch. And they studied, of course, they chose more, better clones for this modern viticulture. This area is famous to be one of the top areas to grow Sangiovese. But I would say we also have the privilege to be able to work with other varieties. So of course, Sangiovese is the main variety, but we can work also with other varieties such as Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Malvasia Nera, Cabernet Franc, and Merlot. So this because of the altitude and the soil. We are in the western sector of Gaiole village, UGA. You know that Chianti Classico is divided in 11 UGA, so Unità Geografiche Aggiuntive, so geographical units or villages or sub-zones. And we are in Gaiole in Chianti. We are in the western part of Gaiole in Chianti UGA. And the main characteristic of our area is the altitude. As I mentioned, normally the altitude exceeds 400 meters above the sea level. So our vineyards are between 350, 520 meters above sea level. Then we have many portions of forests, large expanses of forests, and we are close to the mounts of Chianti, Monti del Chianti. They are not mountains like in Austria, but they reach 800 and 900 meters altitude. So that means that the microclimate of this specific area is quite cool. And that explains why our wines are fruity and they have this crispy character. If you remember, we tasted together, and all our wines have this character. Another characteristic of this area where we are, that is called the Ama, because the name of the winery is the same name of the area where we are, is that the slopes are generally less steeper than the surrounding areas. And here we have two different kind of stones. We have Alberese and Galestro. We have mainly Alberese, that is defined as a kind of a limestone. So it's a calcareous soil. It's formed in ancient seabeds. And also we have Galestro. In some part of the vineyards, you can clearly see these two stones. And Galestro is a rock formation of stone, mudstone or clay, but it's like not compact clay, and sand, which will become clay, but it's not reached the full clay stage. So if you take Galestro in your hand, you can easily break it.
And you already talked a little bit about the beginnings in the 70s, right? And Marco Pallanti was certainly a key figure in the estate's evolution. How did he form the profile and focus of the estate? Because he basically started, I think, in the beginning of the 80s, right? At the estate.
Yeah, so he came here as a young winemaker. He was fresh from the university. And at that time, Castello di Ama had only a few vineyards, but the project was to replant everything. So to choose the right clones and the right varieties for all this land. And also in the meantime, they were buying new pieces of land. So he really started from scratch. He studied in Bordeaux, so he had the opportunity to work with the best winemakers and also to taste many different varieties. Not only Sangiovese, so because he is from Tuscany, but then working in Bordeaux, he had the opportunity to know more about Merlot, about Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc, and etc. So, in fact, one of the first vineyards that he planted was Merlot. First winery to plant Merlot in Tuscany. La Parita, it's 100% Merlot, and then it became one of the first and the most famous Tuscan Merlot.
I also heard about the Petrus of Tuscany, but I imagine that you are not really pleased to hear that because you don't want to compare it to Petrus. But I think it's a nice comparison.
Petrus, but well, we take it as a compliment. I mean, we respect this wine a lot. So, but it's a unique wine because really, if you taste La Parita, if you taste this Merlot, it doesn't really taste of Merlot. It's a Merlot that reminds you the gentle freshness of Sangiovese. Have you ever tasted it?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, next time if you come to visit us, I will be sure that we can open a bottle together.
That's the best invitation I could get, probably. But just go back maybe a little bit to the history, because if my research is correct, there was another guy, actually a Frenchman, Patrick Léon from Bordeaux, who was, I think, formerly also the director of Chateau Mouton Rothschild. And he was also, or he also contributed with the French varieties, right? Or he helped also the estate.
Yeah, it was an important man, Patrick Léon, that in the first years worked as a consultant, the first years of Castello di Ama. And so Marco started to work with him closely, and they worked together, and then Marco took the winemaking direction. But for sure, also the work of Patrick Léon helped to start to set up the first vineyards and the first grape varieties. I mean, we don't have common varieties like Cabernet Franc. We have a small parcel. Then we have a small parcel of Pinot Noir. We have a small parcel of Chardonnay. We really have lots of fun playing with these varieties because we have many opportunities with this high altitude. So, as I said before, it's possible to grow non-conventional Chianti varieties. And then, of course, Sangiovese. Sangiovese, it's the king of this area. It's we love it. We are quite obsessed with Sangiovese. And also we have Malvasia that is another Tuscan or Central Italy variety. But yeah, it's possible to have a combination of indigenous and more experimental varieties that we consider indigenous. We planted 40 years ago.
Because Mr. Pallanti has also been taking a leading role, not only in the evolution of Castello di Ama, but also in the revolution and improvement of the whole Chianti Classico system, right? Because the estate was also a leading producer in the cru system, or you started, or you were one of the first ones who implemented cru specific bottlings, and also with the Gran Selezione, you were also, of course, in the forefront. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution? Why was it so important, and why is it still important?
Yes, so Marco Pallanti has been president of Consorzio for many years. And he was president of Consortium when Gran Selezione classification was proposed and approved. So he worked a lot to make it possible, you know. As a winery, we started in the 70s. He started very early to produce a single vineyard Chianti Classico. Vigneto Bella Vista, Vigneto La Casuccia, San Lorenzo, they've always been single vineyard Chianti Classico. Even before the Gran Selezione, they've always been bottled as single vineyard. So that's why it was a natural step for us to be involved also in the Gran Selezione, and we are happy that the Gran Selezione now has the success worldwide. More and more people look after the sub-region, sub-zone, a single vineyard selection. Because for Gran Selezione, the main characteristic is that the wines has to be estate grown and bottled. So this is a guarantee for the consumers. Also, there is a longer aging time in the bottle and in the barrel, 30 months. And then, of course, Gran Selezione wines are for sure more complex and refined. We're one of the first wineries to be producing the Gran Selezione.
Now in the coming vintages, that's also going to be not complementary, but also compulsory that you only use indigenous grape varieties for Gran Selezione, right? I think from the 27th vintage.
Yes, it's true, because now it's permitted to use 80% of Sangiovese. But yeah, in the future, it will be 90%. Yeah, and now it's also possible for the Gran Selezione to indicate the UGA, so the commune, the village, or the subzone. So we have Gaiole, but you can put Greve, Panzano, Latte, only for the Gran Selezione at the moment.
Because let's talk a little bit about the grape of Sangiovese, and what do you like about this grape? Why is it best suited to this area, to this high altitude kind of coolish climate, and how is it maybe different than some of the warmer parts of Chianti Classico? And how important really is clonal selection for Sangiovese? Because there are a lot of clones in Chianti, and I'm not sure which clones are you using or how site specific should it be?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm Sangiovese is a very ancient variety, even before the Romans. So they use it. The word Sangiovese in Tuscany, so it has more than 3,000 years of history in Tuscany. Main characteristic of Sangiovese, it's quite a late ripening variety and very resistant grape. And it's a specific variety from Italy, but then you have different kind of Sangiovese in Tuscany, Emilia-Romagna, Marche, and also within the same region we have many different kind of Sangiovese. The Sangiovese that we use here is different from the Sangiovese that they have in Italy. And also each winery can use a variety of clones that are different depending on the altitude and the microclimate of that specific area. First thing that you find about Sangiovese for me is that is a very interesting variety because you can have fresh and easy kind of Sangiovese as we do with our Chianti Classico Annata, and then you can have very complex and refined Sangiovese for like Chianti Classico Riserva or Gran Selezione.
So do you see or do you also experience a warming climate in your area? And if so, is Sangiovese a well-adapting grape variety to this new climatic challenges?
Yes,
maybe.
Yeah, of course. As I mentioned before, we are in a very cool area of Chianti Classico, and so we are quite lucky, especially during these changes. So, for example, Marco said that in the 80s he used it to harvest in October, and now we are harvesting in September, and we finish we are the latest finished the harvest in Chianti Classico because of this altitude. But yet, for sure, during the years, we changed a bit the clones of Sangiovese that we use. We use many clones for each of the Chianti Classico. For example, for Vigneto Casuccia, that is one of our Gran Selezione, we have 4 different clones of Sangiovese within the same vineyard. It's a vineyard that is 1.5 hectares, and then we have these 4 clones. For Vigneto La Casuccia, we use other 4. For San Lorenzo, we use maybe 5 or 6, it depends. So just to give you an idea, the aspect within the same vineyard can be different, the altitude and the soil.
But that's also a great tool in the winemaker's hand that you have so many.
Yeah, exactly. And also the winemaker is able to, express the best of each vintage and using a bit more of this or a bit more of that. We always select the grapes before putting them into the fermentation tanks.
Not only among us, but I also did a staff training yesterday in the afternoon. And we were talking about wine trends and new way of wines and what is actually now happening in the wine world. And also the question of new grape varieties came up, of course, because with the warming climate, a lot of different regions like Bordeaux, what we already mentioned, they're also changing varieties like less Merlot, maybe more Cabernet Franc. And then one of my colleagues asked the question, what is happening then with Massetto? With 100% Merlot, with maybe with even more warming climate. And one of your top wines is also La Parita, and this is also single-varietal Merlot. So are you also looking maybe for new varieties, or do you see that the challenges are not so strong in your area? As you already mentioned that you are in the cooler side, but you also planted, I think in 2001 already Cabernet Franc, which was not as popular as now, because now the grape variety has a renaissance, right? So
Yes.
How do you approach these questions, or how is it gonna maybe change in the future? Dear friends, I have to talk to you about something really magical. The last 2 years were quite challenging for me, working at least 45 hours a week as a sommelier, planning our wedding, keeping my workout goals in check, and studying for the WSET diploma on the side. It was not unusual for me to feel sluggish, unfocused, and unmotivated even. But the last 2-3 months were much easier thanks to one product, Magic Mind. This little green drink is a tasty combination of 12 main ingredients, including mushrooms, nootropics, adaptogens, and vitamins, respectively. It was created by accomplished scientists, such as Dr. Andrew Weil, maybe. Dear friends, I have to talk to you about something really magical. The last 2 years were quite challenging for me, working at least 45 hours a week as a sommelier, planning our wedding, keeping my workout goals in check, and studying for the WSET diploma on the side. It was not unusual for me to feel sluggish, unfocused, and unmotivated even. But the last 2-3 months were much easier thanks to one product, Magic Mind. This little green drink is a tasty combination of 12 main ingredients, including mushrooms, nootropics, adaptogens, and vitamins, respectively. It was created by accomplished scientists, such as Dr. Andrew Weil. Maybe you know him from the Joe Rogan podcast. And besides boosting productivity, it even helps reducing daily stress with active ingredients like ashwagandha. So instead of drinking 8 espressi a day like before, I just had 1 shot of Magic Mind every day after lunch with 1 espresso, an hour before my study sessions. And I was back in the game, feeling sharper and more focused without the roller coaster effect of any other common stimulants. The awareness, better focus, and to be honest, even better mood has lasted into the late hours that work beyond 10 p.m. Even the taste is quite pleasant, especially if you keep it chilled in the fridge. I think everyone needs a push in his or her daily hustle, and I think Magic Mind could work for you just as well as it has worked for me. And if you want to get it cheaper than others, you can get a staggering 56% off your first subscription via the link in the show notes, or 20% off your one-time purchase if you use the code WINEGHOST20 in the checkout. That's WINEGHOST without the usual S at the end, 20 in the checkout. But you can find everything in the show notes. But now, back to Reka, to Hungary, and let's focus on the first wine, the Eastern Accents. You know him from the Joe Rogan podcast. And besides boosting productivity, it even helps reducing daily stress with active ingredients like ashwagandha. So instead of drinking 8 espressi a day like before, I just had 1 shot of Magic Mind every day after lunch with 1 espresso, an hour before my study sessions. And I was back in the game, feeling sharper and more focused without the roller coaster effect of any other common stimulants. The awareness, better focus, and to be honest, even better mood has lasted into the late hours that work beyond 10 p.m. Even the taste is quite pleasant, especially if you keep it chilled in the fridge. I think everyone needs a push in his or her daily hustle, and I think Magic Mind could work for you just as well as it has worked for me. And if you want to get it cheaper than others, you can get a staggering 56% off your first subscription via the link in the show notes, or 20% off your one-time purchase if you use the code WINEGHOST20 in the checkout. That's WINEGHOST without the usual S at the end, 20 in the checkout. But you can find everything in the show notes.
Yeah, I think for now is not a huge problem for us since we have this we are at a high elevation, and so we are quite protected at the moment.
Mm.
Yes, it's an interesting point because in the future probably we will be more and more interested in finding a new clones. But of course, the science is going on, and then there are more and more clones available. If you speak about Sangiovese, if you speak about Merlot. For example, speaking about our Merlot, at the moment we have the same clone. It's the same vineyard that Marco planted in 1982. So it's very resistant. So the vines are very old and they produce less and less. So it would be a good question for the next generation, probably. we're still happy. We are very happy with those old vines because they are doing great. But maybe in the next 20 years, we are going to change something. Yeah. We will probably discuss more in the next years about it. I'm also very curious, but really, if you see these old vines, they are doing great.
Yeah, that's true. They are more resistant, right?
They are very resistant. It's incredible. You go there, they just use just few bunches for each vine. They consider that the vineyard it's not even 2 hectares, and it produces 8,000 bottles. But yes, in the next 20 years, I think we are going to discuss more and more about it. No, sorry, I was saying for Sangiovese, we are already If we plant a new vineyard, we already use the new clones available.
Because I also looked at the technical sheets of some of your wines, and what I noticed is that you have a lot of exposures. So you have northern exposure, eastern exposure, western, and southern, of course. But this is also for you probably a big advantage, because if you look in the Côte d'Or, they mostly have south and southeast exposure, and they don't really have a lot of playground, so to say, to do a more balanced cuvée, right?
Yes, exactly. If you come here at Castello di Ama, you will see it's like a big amphitheater. So all the vineyards, especially the Vigneto San Lorenzo, you should come and see, because it's a big amphitheater, and San Lorenzo vineyard is the one that has most of the aspects. So like north, northeast, north, south, southeast. But we have a bit of everything. For example, the Chardonnay it's facing north. That is the coolest hill. That's why our Chardonnay has this crispy and freshness and acidity. But the rest of Sangiovese, it's all around, and that's is great for our wines, because we can always choose the best of each vintage. Sometimes we choose part of the San Lorenzo, sometimes we use a bit more of this, and also for our Reserve and for our Chianti Classico Annata, for example. Our Chianti Classico Annata is made with a selection of the estate Sangiovese, so it's not from a specific plot. And in some vintage, we prefer some plots near San Lorenzo, some plots near the Montebuoni Vineyard, some plots near Bella Vista Vineyard. So the opportunity to choose the best.
So let's talk a little bit about these legendary vineyards, because you have a lot of vineyard selected Sangioveses, right? Or Gran Selezione. Like you already mentioned, Bella Vista. Why is it so special?
I mean, Bella Vista, Casuccia, and San Lorenzo are the three Gran Selezione of Castello di Ama. Vista and La Casuccia are very small. This is the main difference with San Lorenzo. San Lorenzo is a bit bigger as a vineyard, and sometimes in the blend of San Lorenzo you find part of the Bella Vista and Casuccia. Bella Vista and Casuccia are single vineyards, small plots, 1.5 hectares. They are in different locations, not so far between each other, but very, very small plots. The same plots that Marco planted 40 years ago. The difference between these two Gran Selezione, Bella Vista and Casuccia, is the blend. Bella Vista is 80% Sangiovese and 20% Malvasia. Casuccia is 80% Sangiovese and 20% of Merlot. So they have different character, different kind of fruit. The evolution also will be very different. The altitude is more or less the same. It's about 450 meters of altitude. San Lorenzo, it's different again. It's 80% Sangiovese, 10% Merlot, and 10% Malvasia. So as we can consider it as mainly a single vineyard, because it's the San Lorenzo Valley, and sometimes we have the opportunity to blend some Sangiovese from the Bella Vista and the Casuccia vineyard, depending on the vintage. This is a winemaker's choice.
How would you characterize them? Because I heard one colleague of mine, almost friend of mine, told me that La Casuccia is the most straightforward and mineral single vineyard of the Castello di Ama. I didn't have the pleasure to taste all of them, especially not side by side. But how would you maybe give them a character in terms of taste and maybe in profile?
Well, La Casuccia has Merlot, so maybe they have very different character. And Bella Vista maybe can be more austere at the beginning, more serious wine at the beginning, and Casuccia sometimes is more immediate. But then this beautiful evolution, and then their true character will come out with the aging. So it's worth to wait like 10, 15 years to taste those wines, because they will really shine and they will express all their potential. But it's not a huge difference. But of course, the Malvasia, especially in the beginning, gives the Bella Vista this more austere and dark character. What Cha has the gentle sweetness of Merlot, even if it's only 20%, but I find it more immediate. Something that is very important for our wines that are even the Gran Selezione, even the most complex wines are very approachable and fresh. If you 2020 of Bella Vista, Casuccia, San Lorenzo, La Parita, you can enjoy a glass now. You don't have to wait for 40 years. That's something I really like of our wines, that I can really enjoy with my friends if we open a bottle of a young wine.
Especially because yesterday I also drank actually a Gran Selezione. I don't reveal, of course, the name of the winery, but that was a vintage 2017. And of course, it was in 100% new barrique, which I don't particularly like with Sangiovese, to be honest. It could be a bit too much and can mask the delicacy of Sangiovese. But the alcohol was not too high with this wine, but it was 2017 vintage, so it was not a newborn. But the wood was so overwhelming, and somehow I was looking for the delicacy and kind of this elegance of Sangiovese in the wine, but I couldn't find it. And when I tasted the wines, also even the Heiko, which is not even, it's only 50% Sangiovese, if I'm correct, it had this beautiful, not necessarily feminine, but has this kind of very approachable, kind of useful, not too masculine kind of style. You know, it's very, as you already mentioned, it's also in the youth, very approachable, more like a delicate kind of aromatic side of Sangiovese, which I particularly very like. It's also probably due to your higher altitude. But how do you work with these wines? Can you talk a little bit about the wood work
Yes.
and also maybe the fermentation?
So yeah, that's why I told you that for me it's a privilege that we have the same winemaker since 1982, because Marco can really understand about each single vineyard and each single vintage. He's always able to express the best out of each vineyard. We use barrique. It's easy. We use just 225 liters barrique for all the wine. But of course, depending on the wine, we can use old barrique, for example, for our regular Chianti Classico, Ama, it's only old barrels, second and third passage barrique. For Riserva, we use tiny percentage of new oak, like 5%. And for the Gran Selezione, we use 15-20% of new oak. For Haiku and La Parita as well. So as you mentioned it, for us, it's very important that the wine will express the fruit and not the oak is very important. It helps a lot for aging, but it's important to taste the varieties and to smell the varieties, even at the young stage of a wine. That's why we are very careful about the use of the oak. And for Gran Selezione, for every wine that I spent in the oak, it's different. For the regular Chianti Classico, it's 1.5 years. For Riserva, it's 2 years between barrel and bottle. And for the Gran Selezione, it's 36 months between barrel and bottle aging. But not, it's half in the barrel and half in the bottle. But of course, can be different each vintage. So we like to use barrique. We only use barrique, not more than 20-25% of new barrique for the Parita or Haiku.
Because what I also very liked that you have a quite well-structured portfolio. So you have kind of single varietal wines that are maybe more expressing the terroir and the place where they come from, but you also have this very, kind of entry level or kind of showing the more like the regional identity of the area or what you want to communicate or even the style of the winery, right? So was that basically the idea behind the portfolio or?
Yeah, exactly. I think that Marco, when it started, he just wanted to try to express the best out of each single parcel. And then, of course, thanks to his studies abroad, he had the opportunity to work with other varieties. And then, of course, came back here in Chianti and he was excited to start working with Sangiovese, but also he saw the potential for non-conventional varieties. And people appreciate now that we have like Pinot Noir that we have Cabernet Franc. Those grapes are very special. Those grapes are very well adapted to this kind of terroir. So we can say they are in the same land of Sangiovese, and they are well adapted, and they can stay together. Like, for example, we have a wine that is called Aipu, that is a half Sangiovese, and the other half is blended with Merlot and Cabernet Franc, and they play very well together. So with this balance, Marco was able to find this balance, and the wine tastes like Tuscan wine, like a Chianti wine. That's the beauty.
Who is the typical Castello di Ama drinker?
That's an interesting question, because really, I think that we have a large audience for our wines, because we have wines that are very enjoyable and approachable right now, like our rosé wine, Purple Rose, or our Chianti Classico Annata, that people enjoy maybe also in a wine bar as a wine by the glass. And then maybe they get more curious about our wines, and they start to get into Castello di Ama wines, and maybe they buy the Riserva or Gran Selezione. At the same time, we have collectors. They buy La Parita, Vigneto Bella Vista, Vigneto La Casuccia, San Lorenzo. So really, many different kind of people drink our wines. That's great. From young people, from young generation that wants something very approachable, but to top restaurants or wine shops and collectors that buy Bella Vista, Casuccia, La Parita. I see that people start to get involved with our wines, especially with our Chianti Classico, Chianti Classico, but also with our Riserva, because they are very approachable and easy to drink, even without food. You can open a bottle, just a glass, and it's a great way to enjoy a moment with friends or with people that you like.
Because for me, that was also my wife is not the biggest fan of the Sangiovese when it's too powerful. Comes from a warmer place with a lot of new barrique, because I think then that could be also a bit too aggressive, right? But your wines, when we tasted them together, she was amazed of these wines, and that was for me one of the best signs that you do this kind of elegant and also not only approachable but kind of sinuous, more intellectual wines. Maybe for me that was a word, but you can find more depth and complexity and maybe even more layers without the aggressive tannin shoulders, so to say. You know what I mean? It's like, for me, there are a lot of Chiantis and Chianti Classicos even, but for me that was on the elegant side, and that's I appreciate a lot, because we need more elegance, I think, in the wine world. So
thank you. I'm very happy that you say that, because for us the main we are obsessed with the excellence, but we don't want wine on steroids. We don't like that stuff. Our wines have always this clear fruit, are always expressive and vibrant. So even the most complex wines of Castello di Ama, you would find this kind of approachability and elegance. Those are wines that really people that normally don't even drink red wines can approach.
Yeah,
sometimes we have friends that normally drink sparklings or wine. They're not red wine drinkers, that can easily enjoy a glass of La Parita, or easily enjoy a glass of Chianti Classico Riserva, because they are very, very fruity and delicate.
And maybe one last question. Who is that guy? Who is that knight on the label?
This is Guido Riccio da Fogliano. Is a knight. He's an historical knight. Was a knight for the Republic of Siena. So he did many battles. Siena and Florence were enemies in the past. So this knight is kind of the symbol of this area, because we are in the province of Siena, like an hero, a local hero.
Cool. Who fights for elegance. Lapo, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. It was great to be here to tell you a bit more about Castello di Ama. I wait for you to visit our estate. I hope that we will taste some wines together. and I invite everybody to come to visit this beautiful place.
I can also only recommend also the website because I also looked it up. The place is beautiful, and you also have I think an opportunity to sleep, right?
Yes, of course. We have 5 suite rooms, and it's a very quiet and relaxing place to enjoy good wine and also the art, contemporary art.
Cool. Thank you very much, Lapo. Then I see you with the La Parita. I won't forget it.
Yes. Grazie mille.